Evening, afternoon, all. Welcome back to the Trek Way. Mr. Gray and I, thanks for coming along, Gray.
Howdy, howdy.
Howdy, indeed. We're just doing a one-off special today. We haven't done one in a few weeks. There's no timetable or schedule for it. We just do one when we can, when we want to, and we have a sheet of, a spreadsheet of loads of, it's a spreadsheet, it's a Google Doc full of ideas, and we note things down. This one today is a bit more interesting for me. It'll actually be Gray talking more than me, believe it or not, people. Can you believe it? So strap in.
Yeah. Well, you're going to interview me. That's what it is.
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of, and thing is though, right? Because this is where this is all coming from. Gray back in the day did used to interview people of all kinds for his entertainment segment he had on the local radio station. And he interviewed several Trek actors, along with other people in entertainment as well. And if you tune into the Gray's Green Room that he does, that I co-host with him, you've got that scary little chick from the Addams Family interviewed as well, don't you? What's her name again?
Yeah, Christina Ricci. The original.
The original, yeah.
Well, no, take that back. Not the original. She was the second one. The original goes way back to the TV series.
There you go.
TV series was in the late 60s, so that was where it started.
There you go.
And then the movies came out in the 90s, and then now we have just Wednesday, where it concentrates on Wednesday Addams, which is that show's so good too. I'm almost done with it now.
This is why you need to tune in to Gray's Green Room, because he's going to try and dig out that interview if he can find it, and then he'll just put it on. But I'm sure we can talk about it on. He'll release it as a special, won't you, Gray? Probably, and then we can talk about it on the next Gray's Green Room and have a little gab about it. But yeah, so essentially he if you've paid attention to any more of the specials that we have up, they range from all kinds of things to private captains, to some breaking news. We covered Star Trek Day as well, didn't we, Gray? We mostly disliked that. Bad production value, safe to say.
Yeah, I would say
we just wanted to cut out the bits that we enjoyed, which were the trailers and whatnot. They're always the best parts. And we've done we uploaded Gray's interviews from previous Trek actors. You know, people like James Doonan, Takai, Frakes, there and there. Who else do we have? Nichelle Nichols as well. God rest her.
Eventually we'll put out Michelle Forbes. We have a short one on Michelle Forbes. They did. The Takai is coming, and I'm trying to think what else. I did have a Michael Dorn. I can't find it.
Gray remembers who was that lady you mentioned again? The first lady of the new batch.
Forbes?
Yeah. So Gray and I had this conversation. I couldn't picture who she was or where she was, right? And then as soon as I Googled her, I recognize her. She was the nasty admiral from the re-envisaged Battlestar Galactica, Admiral Kane. I'm trying to convince Gray to watch this. People, if you're never going to comment on this channel, comment below telling Gray why he needs to watch the newest version of Battlestar Galactica. It's one of the best sci-fi shows I've ever seen. If Star Trek didn't exist, it'd be number one. That's how good it was. But who did she play in Star Trek again, Gray?
Who did what?
The lady's name again, I've already forgotten.
Michelle Forbes.
Michelle Forbes.
She played Ensign Ro, and she was in Next Generation, and I think she was in a little bit of Deep Space Nine. The whole thing on her was that Ensign Ro was supposed to be, or this is what they originally intended for the character and the actress, was to become what Narit is in Deep Space Nine. So in other words, she was going to be the head of the station, aside from Cisco, of course. And I guess the rest is history, because she turned it down. She didn't want to stay only on one show. Not that she didn't dislike it; she loved it, but she wanted to do other things in her career. And to be truthful, it probably worked out good, because Michelle Forbes has had actually a very good career with lots of different things.
Glad you say that, Gray, because remember me telling you how good she was in Battlestar Galactica? She played a kind of Colonel Nerys type character. She was a lot nastier than her, if I'm being honest, without giving it away, because I do want you to watch it. She goes about captaining the ship and the fleet in such a dictatorship kind of way that she goes above and beyond what she should be allowed to do, and she's got that kind of arsey attitude. She takes no shits from no one, and that's Colonel Major Nerys. Is she a colonel or major now? I've lost count. That's Nerys for you. She would have been great in that role. I'm kind of glad she didn't get that role, because we wouldn't have had Nana visitor, and I love Nana. She was she my favourite character on that show. One of them, bloody good.
I think the thing about the least good Trek anyway is that you tend to have a really good ensemble. There's really not one per se. I mean,
it's true.
You can say that you're going for the captain. Okay, I get it. But generally, the top 3 to 5 or whatever cast members are pretty strong, and the ensemble clicks, because how could you, especially Deep Space Nine, where they're always on the station, so they, generally speaking, so they didn't go to many planets. And on Deep Space Nine, you loved Sisko, you loved Nerys, you loved Odo, you loved Quark, you loved
everyone.
Later, you were used to Worf. He came along, that kind of just made it that much better. Nog and
God rest
his son Jake, and it just keeps on going. So,
this is why Gray needs to watch. You'll get around to Discovery season 3 and 4, because you see a tribute to Nog. One of the futuristic ships is called the USS Nog, which was a really, really nice. And what was the actor's name again? Do you remember? I'm really bad for that.
No.
Whatever his name is, I apologise for not knowing. In fact, let me tell you right now. Let's see. Nog character. Nog character. Let's see.
See how fast Google really is.
Aaron Eisenberg. Right. So, in third, is it the 4th season? Both of Discovery. It's called the USS Nog, and it's the Eisenberg class. Not only did they name a ship after him, they named a bloody class of ship after him. That is classy. That is class. And there's the Voyager J, which I'm really happy about. You Google the Voyager J and have a little sneak peek at that. Great. Ooh, she looks good. Anyway, we're already diverging, as we do. It's typical the Trekway style. So as I was saying before, because of Gray interviewing these cracking actors back in the day, he found out some things, some home truths that he's going to diverge a little bit. He's just going to chew the fat. But first of all, Greg, could you tell the people how you came about this interview chance that you had, how you got this little slot for your entertainment show that you've already told me, but the viewers don't know?
I mean, at the time, I was working on getting an entertainment talk show. Kind of like what we do now, but back then it was only radio because there was no internet, or at least initially, and so forth. If you can believe that, right?
I'm saying nothing.
So,
Nick would normally say something. I'm not. Nope.
So, in any case, starting the show up was kind of coincided with the fact that my good friend at that time was producing Star Trek shows, and he was producing Star Trek shows all around the country. At that time, I was doing a lot of advertising and marketing. That's what I did for 30, 35 years. And he gives me a call and says, "Look, I'm doing these Star Trek, conventions around the country. I need your help to put together TV spots and to help me buy the time on TV stations where the shows are going to be, to advertise them before they get there, et cetera, et cetera." So I said, "Cool." So I saw an opportunity, and I said, "Look," not that I was going to ask him for money other than my expenses and stuff for everything, but I said, "Look, you could do me a favor. You don't have to pay me my fee as long as I get to interview the actors, or at least minimum of meeting them.
I would have taken the money.
And better than that, being able to interview them, put them on a show." So he said, "Sure, we can work that out." So it was a good relationship, and through that, I was able to meet not everybody on the Star Trek casts of some of the shows, but enough. And what we would end up doing is I would take the star, and we would, prior to maybe the event or them going on stage to talk or whatever, I would get anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes to 45 minutes, whatever, to talk to the star, ask whatever I wanted, and et cetera, et cetera. So we would go to some quiet part of the hotel and and do our thing. So as you can see on the Trekway, I didn't do a lot of these interviews happened in the 90s, like 1991, 90. And unfortunately, sometimes the audio isn't the greatest, but you can hear it well enough for sure.
Yeah.
But this is such a thing. I mean, you're talking about videotape and audio tape that's 30 plus years ago.
Yeah.
I'm surprised some of it even survives, but it's weird. A lot of times have passed, but I remember it like it was yesterday to some of these people, and I was just like thrilled to be able to talk to people such as this, but also because it was from Star Trek. And it is true sometimes when you talk to some people and they say, when you talk to celebrities or whatever, are they divas? Are they regular people? And I found that most of the people that I've talked to were all pretty much regular people when you really started to talk to them.
Good.
And I would talk to them not on camera or not on audio, and it'd be pretty much the same thing. We'd be talking about maybe favorite sports they like or favorite movies that they like, or
They're not Trek related,
you
just
know, or,
normal day stuff.
yeah, just normal stuff. In fact, I used to go out of the way when we weren't on camera to talk about things other than Trek, because I knew that not that they didn't want to talk about Trek, but when you talk about it inside, outside, all day, every day when you're or it seems like every day when you're doing conventions,
Yeah.
you look for a little bit of outlet to talk about something else.
Smart.
So we would often talk about whatever happened to be going on,
Yeah.
or anything, which is kind of neat. One of the out of the people I've talked to a bunch of different people, and they're all like their personalities are definitely different from one to the other.
Who was your favorite if you're going there before you do the whole spiel and one go break up? Who's your most
I talked to the
delightful?
TOS cast, some of them. I've talked to some of the next gen casts. Probably my favorite would be James Doohan, who played Scotty, only because he was a real interesting guy. He'd been around and done a lot of stuff.
Talkative.
Yeah, very talkative, and he would also not hold back. He would give you opinions, bad, good, or indifferent. No problem. And generally speaking, his evaluations or what he talked about were usually pretty good.
Yeah.
And he would talk about it in such a way that he wasn't what would be the right word? He wasn't trying to be vitriolic against people. He was just kind of saying as a matter of fact kind of thing.
Well, like me, he speaks his mind. I appreciate that.
Right. Now, some of that could be taken as being somebody who had some kind of a vendetta on someone else today.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't that. And it's hard to explain because unless you were, talking to him a lot. I spent probably more time with Jimmy Doohan than I did the other crew, only for whatever reason, because at that time when he came down, we had put together a larger radio tour.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically were in a limo with him.
Limo.
I was.
Posh
yeah, I was in limo.
bugger that you are.
So I'm in a limo, so I'm
drinking
sitting
the
here
champagne and
here's Jimmy Doohan right here next to me. Hey, Jimmy, what's up? And we're sitting there talking, going from station to station. So we visited probably 5 stations in that little tour of I guess it was maybe 2 hours or something.
2 hours, nice.
And so we go in each station. They would interview him for 10 or 12 minutes, and hey, how you doing? We'd leave and go on to the next thing. One of the little stories that was pretty cool is at that time, the post-production house that I was working with, and post-production, if you don't know what that is basically after filming certain things, whether it be a commercial, a movie, or anything.
Now it's CGI people, usually.
Right. Goes into post-production, which could mean a lot of things. Editing, putting together the music, the character stuff you see on the type. I don't want to say character generated, but the typing, the letters and things you see across the titles. All the garbage is done in post-production. So there was a post-production house that we used, and we kind of churned off these Star Trek commercials because they were pretty much kind of like rubber stamped. Every one of them were very similar to each other because they didn't need to be different.
Yeah.
So we would just kind of pump them out. So when we went there, a couple of the people there, especially the president of the company, was a big Star Trek nut. So he was always happy to. He himself generally would not always come into the client's room to watch stuff because he's too busy with other stuff going on and running the business. But whenever we came, he would always find time to come and chat with us. And many times we brought this, if they were in town, we tried to bring a star with us if we could. It didn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But this day, it was kind of unusual because when we went into the post-production room, this is probably about a year or two before we brought Jimmy Doohan down. They had a big wall. Imagine your bedroom, a good-sized bedroom, and one whole wall was completely painted black, and then stars and planets and everything were drawn around. And then in the middle, about this big, was the Enterprise. Okay. I knew this. So I sat there and I told my friend at the time, I says, dude, if Jimmy Doohan's coming down here and we're going to be running around anyway, we got to bring him into the studio and just don't tell anybody. Just telling him, just book a session as if we're going in there to edit stuff, even though we knew we're.
Was this the original one they used for the model?
No. This was a painting on a wall.
Still
so what it was a painting. And this guy spent time. It was a nice looking Enterprise, and it was pretty good size.
Yeah.
Painted on the wall. So it looked like it was going through space on this big wall. So I said, don't tell them that we're bringing Jimmy Doohan. Just tell them like we're going to come in and we're going to edit commercials together like we always do. So, okay. So we do that. And then we walk in with Jimmy Doohan, and the front desk people knew who he was right away. And they're like, and we're like, what's going on? And they're like, it's the Scotty, you know. And I said, yes, James Doohan, this is hi. And he's shaking his hand and everything. And everybody's all like just so happy. And then the president comes out and he's freaking out. He's sitting there going like, oh my God, that's Jimmy Doohan, welcome. He was like just beside himself.
Is that what he liked to be called? Sorry to interrupt. Did he like to be called Jimmy? Was that his thing? He was like, please call me Jimmy. If someone tried to call him James or Mr. Doohan, or
when he was introduced, he liked to be called James Doohan.
Fair enough.
I got the feeling that you really could only call him Jimmy if you spent a lot of time with him.
Did you call him Jimmy?
I called them both James, Jimmy.
Okay, right, okay. Yeah.
You know, but anyway, so as we come into the room, you know, because at this time they still think we're editing commercials too. And he says, no, we're not really here to edit commercials, but we did bring Jimmy by to sign the wall.
Oh, nice.
And they just went, what? And he says, yeah, you know, did you want Jimmy to sign the wall right under the Enterprise? And they just go, yeah. So we had to find we had to find the proper pen to write on the wall. So we got one of those, you know, those pens that write. They look like they're writing metallic.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So like it's like a gray colored metallic. So he goes up to the Enterprise and he just puts James Scotty Doohan.
Yeah, I love his signature.
You know, right under the Enterprise, and it stayed there for years until, unfortunately, the business closed eventually. Oh. I always wondered though, because I lost track of the guy.
You want the picture?
No. But I was curious, and I could be wrong about this, but I just got the feeling that when they were getting ready to move out of this place or whatever they did, somebody, I'm assuming or hoping it was the president of the company, probably chiseled that out of the wall and kept it.
That is why would you not? Why would you not put it in a canvas and put it on the wall? That's
or something.
They never thought that one through. That's cool, man.
Well, luckily it was on what they call drywall. It wasn't really on concrete, so you didn't have to literally chip it out.
Yeah.
So they could actually just cut it out or whatever. So I'm hoping that I hope he took it. But that was like one of the coolest days, though. That was just totally. You want to see people just totally floored, like.
So were you?
There was actually one or two people in the room that didn't know who Scotty was because they weren't.
Of course,
really
one or two that are not Trekkies, of course.
Yeah, right, exactly. But most people really knew, and they're just kind of like, I can't believe it.
Can I ask really quickly, Gray? I'm sorry if I missed this point. Why were you following him about from station to station when you didn't really do that with anyone else?
Well, with some people or some of the actors and actresses, they like anything else. You have contracts, and although I wasn't privy to seeing the actual contract, I knew enough about what it was. My friend told me.
Yeah.
And some of them agree to do interviews at radio stations, and some of them don't. Some of them will agree to go to one station. Some will agree to go to multiple stations. It all depends on what they think, feel, or decide to do. Generally speaking, almost everybody that came in will always do an interview with me. That's because I'm charming. So
just have that kind of face, don't you?
No, but I'd like to think the fact is that I'm not a pushy kind of person, and I just sit down and talk normal stuff with these people,
Yeah.
and they get to like me right away, and so I usually don't have any issues when
So
I
you
was interviewing.
interview Jimmy at the start of your touring or at the end as part of?
No, more towards the end. We did
Yeah.
the tour of the stations first, and because it was prior to the weekend of the show, and then the show usually ran Saturday and Sunday, sometimes Friday night. So we would do all that the lead up stuff maybe the day before or something like that. Um, so it was kind of fun. It was always fun coming to the stations and watching them all, gawk at the at whoever star I bring in or something.
You found out some home truths as well that you I think you're comfortable sharing because God rest his soul, he's passed on now and not going to sue you hopefully. So so you're in a car for a while, the limousine. You're having to chew the
Mhm.
fat, aren't you, and kill some time. And because he basically says what's on his mind, which I love, he maybe blabs a bit too much, but he tells you some things that you found
Yep.
interesting from certain characters or actors he's worked with and a certain
Mhm.
TV show he's worked on.
Yep. I'm probably not privy to say everything he told me, but I can say certain things that are fine
Yeah.
because that's not a big deal. But the gist of the conversation sometimes when it did happen to drift on the show, because like I said, I didn't always talk about the show off camera, so but we did a little anyway. But the gist of it was how he got along, or his perceptions of how some of the other crew got along with each other and or the characters and stuff. Um, from what I gather, and some of this people have seen in articles as well, there was kind of a split between the cast, and I don't mean a split meaning they hated each other necessarily, but you had your top three, and your top three, of course, in the original series was going to be Shatner, Nimoy, and DeForest Kelly. So you would tend to find those three kind of hanging around each other more often than they would be hanging around with the rest of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they weren't seeing them. Doesn't mean they didn't see them. Doesn't mean they didn't intermingle with them. So I don't want people to start thinking like, oh, they never talked to them. No, that's not the case. It's just that tend to be the somewhat of the division, and that's not unusual back then with certain stars that have attained a certain stature. It's not that they're not every star acts like they're
Prima
the old
donna.
style king, yeah, or the old style king and queen from years ago. They're
Yeah,
like, don't touch me, so not I'm not gonna say that there are a few that are like that, but
of
just
course.
not that many. So it wasn't really so much that. It's just that's just the kind of how the hierarchy, if you want to call it that, just kind of fell into place. So that was one thing. Um, uh, Jimmy pretty much got along fine with the rest of the cast. Nichelle, he had many good things to say about Nichelle and George Takei and Walter Koenig and
That's good.
and the rest and stuff overall. When it got to those three, everybody kind of knew who DeForest Kelly was because DeForest Kelly actually had a history before he came on the show.
Yeah.
DeForest Kelly used to star. If you Google him,
Was he the
you'll
oldest in the
see that
show?
he's
Great, sorry.
sorry. At that
Oh,
time,
it's
yes.
okay.
At that time, yes. He had already been in a lot of westerns. And if you look at his
Wow.
filmography, he was in a bunch of westerns, and a lot of times he was a bad guy. And he was the perfect bad guy. He's played actually pretty good in some of those pictures. Now it's not unusual to think about this too, because Roddenberry always said that Star Trek was a western in outer space. This is the way he always viewed it.
True.
Is trying to take a western and put it into outer space. What would it be? Forrest Kelly came from westerns, so he knew what that was about. So as far as I guess the at that time the one that had done the most, it was really D. Kelly. So at that time,
Yeah.
now he said he had a Jimmy said he had a pretty good relationship with him as when it gets to talking about Nimoy and Shatner, then it starts to change a little. He got along fine with Nimoy, but he wasn't. My guessing, or from what I was putting together from the conversation, was that he was closer to the rest of the cast than he really was with the
Yeah.
big three. And Scotty is always kind of like, which was cool. The character Scotty was always kind of like right in between. So he wasn't in the big three, but he was also a little up above the rest of the crew, and essentially this, and that's true in the scheme of order, more or less, because you're going to have your captain, your first officer, medical, and you're going to have your engineer, usually. So it kind of made sense, I guess. But it seemed he got along more with the rest of the cast as opposed to the big three more now. He's told me in the past, because especially when they started getting into doing the movies more, and Nimoy started wanting to and or pushing for the fact that he would like to direct Star Trek. Now, Nimoy has directed a couple things, and if you remember, he did 3 Men and a Baby, if I remember correctly, which actually was up for awards and stuff. It was a really good movie. He also directed several other things that actually worked out
during Star Trek days, yeah, like the early Star Trek days,
and afterwards.
Oh yeah,
as well. So he's got a decent little, resume behind him as far as directing.
Yeah.
But how the directing came about initially, especially with Star Trek, and I don't know the complete story with this, but you kind of heard about it in articles. But anyway, when Wrath of Khan came out, everybody knows this now. He didn't want to play Spock anymore, and he wanted to basically have the character go out in style, or the way it should be. And when you saw Wrath of Khan and Spock dying at the end, of course, everybody was shocked. And yeah, really, not now anymore, not 40 years later or whatever. But anyway, so and it was the hardest kept secret, because there was many little things they tried to do to keep people from really knowing that ending was going to happen that way, and no one really suspected it. There was a little story, and it's out there on the internet too, that there was a scene in Wrath of Khan with the Kobayashi Maru, right?
Yeah.
And there was a scene where Spock was playing part of the Kobayashi Maru for the cadets. And in the scene, the cadet ends up failing the mission, of course, because you can't win the no-win situation, or the no-win scenario. And in that scene, Spock dies. He gets electrocuted or whatever. Kobayashi Maru, but he's dead on the floor.
And that was brilliant acting within acting. Sorry, Gray, that bit was brilliant acting within acting. The way he just felt, because remember Bones coming in after. Was it Bones? No, it was Shatner.
Shatner. Kirk comes in. He goes, "Aren't you dead?" He says. Now, the funny thing about that is that scene was the scene that they used to be the subterfuge to the fact that Spock really was going to die. So the story went out like, "Oh, Spock dies. Oh no, he can't die." And so to get around that, they're saying like, "Oh no, there's supposed to be a scene or something where he dies, but he doesn't really die."
Yeah.
And that was the scene. So when you first saw the movie, and myself included, when I saw that scene, and Kirk goes up to Spock and says, "Aren't you dead? Are you supposed to be dead? Aren't you supposed to be dead?" I said, "Oh, that was what they're talking about. Oh, okay.
Brilliant. I love
now
that.
I get it."
Yeah.
And because it's happened so early on in the movie, totally took your mind off the fact that Spock was ever going to die. So that when he did die, holy crap, the entire theater was dead quiet. And quite a few people were sobbing. Including myself. So it really, really hit. So now, afterwards, of course, they're all like, "Oh my God, that was such a great movie," and da-da-da. Is Spock really going to be dead on this? So then the talks started happening. Now, I don't remember. There's different stories. They say that the talks started before Wrath of Khan hit the theater, or whether it was after Wrath of Khan hit the theater, whatever. But Nimoy started saying this. They started going, "Oh my gosh, we have to bring you back somehow. Are you sure you don't want to play Spock anymore?" And Nimoy started double thinking this, and he said, "Well, okay, but the caveat is that I get to direct." Ding. So when Star Trek 3: Search for Spock came out, who's directing? Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, but was there a big pushback? Did they try and say no, or did they give the role, the director role to him?
No, I don't think there was much of a pushback, because they didn't have much choice. They felt
they could
we have a winner here.
Directing, that could have backfired.
And look, Star Trek 2 at that time made so much money back then that they were like, "Oh my God, we found the cash cow. We got to keep this rolling."
Yeah.
And so they agreed, and of course, the Search for Spock was pretty good. Leonard Nimoy directed number 4, which was also very good.
Shatner done 5, didn't he?
Well, the story is, and I'm sure it's all true, that after Nimoy directed 2, Shatner's going like, "Hey, I got a direct one.
He directed nothing though. What?
So he directed 5, which unfortunately in the group of
It was
pictures
crap. It
out
was
of
the
out of the
worst.
6, now that I've gone back to it and watched it again, there was some actually very good scenes in
It's
the
either
movies,
that one
but
or
not
number
many.
one. Maybe number one's a bit worse. I don't know. I can never make up my mind if 1 or 5 is the worst. But
Yeah, I definitely don't look at number 1 as being the worst. I would always put number 5, but there was some still worthy scenes in the movie.
yeah,
But most of it. Now, what was kind of funny though is, if I remember right, Star Trek 5 is where they introduced Cybok,
that
which is
sounds like
Spock's half brother.
like
Which
sneakers.
apparently,
I'm sorry. Just what the
yeah. But now we have Cybok in, what was it?
Strange New Worlds. That was genius. That was good writing, Gray. That was smart.
Yeah.
I like that.
Go back and pick a character that only was around briefly,
And flesh
everybody's
him out
forgotten
big time.
about, and then all of a sudden, he's back. See, now
wait
that
for
was
season
cool the
2.
way they did it. So the way they handled though having what's her name in Star Trek Discovery being his sister was awful. Sorry.
Burnham.
It-
Michael
Yeah,
Burnham.
it's still awful. Always will be awful.
No, I
The
agree.
whole way
That
they handled it was
there
awful.
was no need for it. You could have done it
None at
without
all.
it. She could have just been. She could have been raised by Vulcans and not connected with Spock. That would have been fine. Why?
Yeah.
That was the that was the first part of the downfall of shitting all over Star Trek canon.
Yeah,
All right, just
exactly.
Don't get me started, man.
I know. So anyway, that's the story from coming out. To circle that back around to Jimmy Doohan, I asked Jimmy Doohan about Shatner, and he was a little careful what he said, but he said what he thought. And basically, he said that Shatner really didn't treat everybody except the big 3 with all that much respect. It was a certain amount of respect. But it was more like, I've attained my stature in life, and you haven't yet, sort of. So again, I'm taking it from one guy, and I tend to believe it only because Jimmy really was very honest in his opinion, and very smart guy too. So he said that he didn't really get along with a lot of us, meaning Doohan on down. It was just like the relation, but the way he explained it was very interesting. Though he didn't make it sound as if Shatner actively hated them or actively sought out after to be pissed off about them. He was putting it more, and people have to remember this is a lot of years ago. You're talking like 40 years ago.
He didn't go out his way to interact with the rest of the cast.
But this is the way a lot of the stars acted back there, not just in Star Trek. In many movies, many TV shows at that time, and going back even more so in the 30s and 40s. Okay, if you're a star, it's like, hey, I'm a star. I don't need to be around you. Nothing personal, but I'm a star. And stuff. And that's the way it was treated. And even though when they did the movies, which was later than the 30s and 40s, obviously, there's some of that was still present in the way things were done, not like today. So Jimmy said, look, he said, there is no better actor, in my opinion, ever to play a captain in Starfleet, but William Shatner. He flat out would tell me that. He said he was Captain Kirk. He always will be Captain Kirk, and and in my eyes, he's always going to be the best. He's just good. He's just good.
Yeah, agreed.
So he's separating the fact of that from the personal relationship side of things and stuff. So he wanted me to understand that I'm not trying to say he was trying to be mean necessarily.
No, you were asking the questions, to be fair. So
right, but he wasn't going to like do you any favors either. Okay. Yeah. Unlike he said Nimoy, who he was a little closer to and was always pretty nice, and DeForest Kelley, etc. Now, one of the funny Jimmy told me though was that when they were filming Star Trek 4, okay, he was wondering why Shatner was being very nice to him and being very nice to the rest of the crew, and he was like,
"What's he after?
Right? Is something wrong with him? What's going on here?" He said that a lot of times there was parts where Jimmy was, might have been on his knees or on the ground or something like that, and Shatner actually came over to help him up. more than once on the set. And he's like, "You feeling okay? Got a fever or something?" And everything. And he didn't know what was going on. And then finally, he finds out near the end of the filming of Star Trek 4 that the deal had been made for him to direct 5.
Also,
Shatner to
just he
direct
was in a
5.
good mood. Oh,
And then
okay.
he's going, "Oh, ding," because he's going to be directing all of us in the next movie. So he wants to get on the good side while he can. And so that made total sense, and so I'm like, okay. So now you understand all of a sudden where I took a turn and got all nice because, hey, I'm going to have to boss you guys around on set when we do
Yeah.
Star Trek 5. So that was that story. So it was pretty funny. The only other little stories that are really cool is a lot of people may or may not know that Jimmy Doon was quite the linguist. Now he was not that he was necessarily studying to be one, but he picked up accents rather well. He could do a lot of different accents. It was just a talent of his. So he would end up getting picked up as a linguist. In when he did his parts, they would just come up and say, "Hey, can you do this accent? Can you do that accent?" And so he starts going into the accents while we're sitting in the car one time driving. So he
Oh,
goes
did
into
he?
the
That was one of my
he
questions.
goes into the. Of course, he's speaking normal American because he was
And did he
American,
switched into Scotty, didn't he?
and he would just switch into Scottish, and then he's switching to,
Ah,
and then he
love
was
it.
switching to like every other dialect you could think of throughout Scotland, Ireland, England. And he's going, yeah, well, so when you're talking like in the whatever, he would talk this kind of accent from this area of the country. It's like this, but and he would just do it. And we were
Wow.
just listening to this, and it was funny.
Yeah, because
It was
He's got Northern Irish family background ties, doesn't he? Way back.
he has Scottish too, by the way.
Yeah, both. But if you listen to
Yeah.
Gray's interview with him, he actually tells you why he came away with the Scottish accent he did, and it's credit to Jimmy himself, why he came away with that accent. He literally was asked his opinion of what accent he should go for. They left it up to him, and he went, "Well, he's got to be Scottish, don't he? Because he makes some of the finest engineers." And I went, oh, "Yeah, I'm going to be impartial and agree with him there." And while it wasn't a bang-on accent, I don't expect it to be, A, because he's not Scottish, and B, because the Scottish accent can be thick sometimes. So he puts a purposeful angle on
had
it,
to make the accent.
like Mel Gibson in Braveheart. That's not how it sounds, but he puts it in a way that can be understood. It's still believable. And hey, I loved it. I don't care.
Believe me, some of the accents he was doing when we were in the car, I couldn't even understand some of the stuff he was saying. So he knew how it's supposed to
the
sound.
Northern Irish.
Right, but he had to Americanize, so to speak, the Scottish accent so that people could understand what the heck he was saying.
Yeah.
So and that worked, but everybody knew, he was Scottish. There was no doubt.
Yeah.
And his character was great though. He went out of the way to always talk about the whiskeys or whatever that he got a hold of.
So is he giving whiskeys and stuff because of the character?
No, he just
liked a good wee dram, regardless.
He liked to drink, so it was the thing for him.
Were you drinking that in the limousine, Gray?
No.
Your champagne, your woman, you're having a great time with James.
No. When they are in that mode, that's not happening.
Okay.
Although I wonder, because not with Jimmy, but there was a time I went on one. I met Walter Koenig once, and we talked, and he did a great interview and stuff like that. And
Where's the interview, Gray?
I wish I had that one. Some of the interviews are lost, maybe forever. Some of them are. I'm lucky.
If they're under your couch, viewers, if you find them under your couch, please post them into the track. We'll put them online.
Well, when I was going around with Walter to the different, but we went to 3 or 4 stations. There was talk about 2 different things going on at that time, because not only was he obviously Star Trek and stuff like that, but he also had a very big role in Babylon 5, which happens to be my second most favorite sci-fi series right after Trek. And he played a character in that, and so he was actually popular for that as well. So the questions were coming out from both sides, both about both shows, although mostly Trek. But what I thought was funny that day that I interviewed him, and I can't tell you for sure, I can only tell you what I suspect, but I don't know. He was the kind of guy, at least that day, where when he wasn't on camera or he wasn't in the front of the microphone, he wasn't on, turned on to do his thing, to do his interview. I couldn't think of anything more than Space Cadet. So he was like, when he was off, he was just kind of like almost like the stereotypical '60s hippies kind of thing. And he's just kind of like, yeah.
Did he do his character's voice as well for you? Or did he refuse to do it?
Of course he did. No. He did a little bit. But he was just kind of like this, kind of like, yeah, well, yeah, man, a few words, and just kind of like rolling his head around, and like his eyes are like. So I'm sitting there thinking, like,
was he on something?
So I don't know. I mean, I suspect that maybe he was. I don't really know. But here's the thing that was really cool of him, and maybe it's because an actor can do these things. I was a little bit concerned because I was like, oh boy, what happens when he gets in front of the mic and the mic's turned on and he's doing that?
He'll switch like that, won't he?
Oh my God, like a light switch. As soon as he was just like, yeah. And then as soon as the microphones went on, he's completely like I'm sounding right now. Just did straight interview.
Smelling salts under his nose. You're back.
Yep, was joking around with them, and we, talking. Really great interview. Went off really well. Then when we left the studio, he was back to.
Are you trying to talk to him the whole time and get stuff out of him? And
I was, but he wasn't real talkative. I mean, he wasn't rude or anything.
So how did you get an interview with him? That must have been very dull.
Yeah, it didn't last very long, but that way. But it went for a few minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
But that was just the funniest thing, and I'm sitting there going like, "Wow, man, I'm not gonna even guess what you might be on or not on, or maybe he's just like this all the time. I have no idea, but it was interesting."
Oh, is there any reason you never got hold of Bill?
Well, the main three, the top three at that time, when my friend was doing the Star Trek conventions, he basically couldn't get a hold of those three for various reasons. One of them being they wanted a lot of money to be, and that wasn't going to work. The budget for the Star Trek shows were only what they were. He was able to do many more shows.
Sorry, is this for your interviews or for the radio interviews, or is this for conventions?
Well, the point is that when the convention happened in my city, which they did all the time, I automatically got the interviews. So he was already bringing them in anyway for the show. I didn't have to pay for anything. And they could do the interviews, which would be great for the show, great for the Star Trek in general, stuff like that. But there really wasn't a budget at that time to bring in the top three guys. It just was too much.
It's always about this, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It would have been nice to be able to talk to some of them. Now, aside from that, some of them didn't want to do the interviews either. I don't believe Shatner was doing many interviews at all back then. You were lucky if he did one.
Did he do conventions at all that you're aware of?
Not as much back then as he did a little later. But whenever he did, it was definitely major coin, and that's okay. So his price is his price. Nimoy, the same thing. Nimoy only did so many shows, but it was gonna cost you to get him out. Same thing. DeForest Kelley, because he was older, DeForest Kelley died, I think, in the early '90s or mid '90s.
Yeah,
so he wasn't around, to do shows really that much. So I never got a chance to meet him. As far as the TNG crowd, I met or interviewed, depending. Like I said, Michelle Forbes, Jonathan Frakes, who else? Gates McFadden, Brent Spiner. Neither one of them did interviews.
And you don't have. He doesn't have these interviews. He can't find them, guys. These two.
No. I actually did not do one with either one of them because they weren't doing them.
Oh.
But I did get to mingle with them because every time we would do a Star Trek convention, there would always be like a cast party for the people that worked on the convention. So we would all attend like a dinner thing, and the stars came out. It was required, but they came out either way. And so that was kind of nice because you got to mingle around for like an hour and get something good to eat and chat with them and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
So.
That just for all the staff that worked there then, basically, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. And we all got pictures and signed and everything. I've got all my Star Trek pictures. I'll show you them again one day, but whatever. They're all, signed and stuff like that.
I've lost mine. I had them all. I had all mine signed from the Voyager convention, mate, and I can't find them for love nor money. devastated.
Yeah,
you know.
and I don't have every single cast member sign. I could have easily, but I don't. I have things like
My claim
here I
to
have a
fame is meeting Kate Mulgrew. Jerry Ryan wasn't there; she was
cool.
probably too big, you know. But
That's cool.
and the rest of them, some of the names escape me right now. But I wanted to ask you, Gray. So if you're finished covering like Jimmy and what he was saying, would you say there was someone that was maybe, now this is not about causing an insult to any actor or person here. That's not where I'm coming from this question. But was there someone that was, the interview was just underwhelming and a bit meh, whether it's recorded or not? Would that be Walter? Funnily enough,
Probably.
yeah, because he wasn't saying
Probably.
much.
It wasn't a bad interview, but it could have been better. But it wasn't terrible.
He didn't
either.
say a lot, but then neither did Frakes. If you listen to that interview, he was a lovely guy, but it just seemed that was the shortest of all of them, you know?
Well, to be honest, most of the stars don't really talk all that long. They generally talk around 10, 15 minutes, and that's it. You know, and even when you think about it, when they did appear on talk shows, even on TV, you really think about it. As far as being on air, they weren't really on air for more than 10 or 15 minutes. That's
That
it.
is true if you think
So that's
about
what they're
it.
used to. Now, Nichelle Nichols talked a long time to me, but that was her choice. I didn't.
Yeah, that was one
I
of the
didn't
best
know.
ones.
Right. I didn't know that was going to go that long. Whether she took a liking to me, I'm sure that was part of it. But even so, that doesn't mean you're going to have somebody spend the time. But
True.
she just
A
wanted to talk, man.
A little caveat there, Gray, for the viewers. You need to go back and listen to the Nichelle Nichols interview, because Gray is 110% totally flirting with her. 100%. And I kind of don't blame him, because she was a nice looking gal back in the day. So, you know, good on you, Gray, trying to get in there. Well done. You could have been famous.
Sure.
But you were a family man, so we'll let you off.
She genuinely wanted to talk, and so I just said, I'm thinking to myself while I'm listening to her, this is great. Now, some of the people that were producing the show knew that she had to come out in front of the audience at a certain time. You know, they're on schedule, and they're like getting nuts, man. I could see them in the background. I mean, Art, you gotta have her stop. And I'm sitting there going like, what am I going to do? Just tell her to shut the hell up? I mean, I'm not going to do that. So
bless her.
I just it had to go the way it went. So finally, when she finished and everything, they were like, you know, we gotta go now. When they tried to like zoom her off to, you know, to get into the next thing. And I think she was about 15 minutes late to her talk or whatever.
Oh dear, it's all your fault, Greg. We're just going to blame you, man. Whoever was at that that convention. Oh,
but that was unusual. Otherwise, most of the time, all the interviews I did, you generally were usually 10 to 15 minutes, because that's more or less what they always would be.
That's pretty awesome.
I mean, a side story when you're talking about stars and stuff like that. Many years ago, going back to, I think it was the 20th anniversary of Disney World. Now they're celebrating their 50th, so you can tell how old I'm getting. But anyway, back when they did the 20, my radio show did a lot of stuff with Disney for the 10 years I was on. So they invited me up because they're having a big. They've never had one as big as this, including the 50th. Now, never had one this big for the media ever since, and so they invited us up, and what they did is some of the stars that were in for the event, okay, they put up a, what'd you call it, like a mini studio,
okay,
and they had like 3 rooms. I think it was 3 rooms. So the stars of various things would appear in these 3 rooms, and literally, the newspaper, television, radio, whomever it was, would go into the room. You got 10 minutes, and if you're not done in 10 minutes, we're going to pull you out.
Okay.
And like, okay. So we just go in for 10 minutes and get our, you know, thing, and then we're done. So one of the interviews that I had that day, even though a lot of people aren't going to remember this guy, but is Robert Culp. And I don't know if you remember Robert Culp, but he was a guy that was did a lot of stuff. He did Outer Limits episodes. He was an I Spy.
I loved
and did other
Limits.
things too.
Yep.
He was definitely he was in 2 episodes, I believe, Outer Limits. But Robert Culp was pretty famous that day, and literally, you know, they gave you a sheet and they said, "Who do you want to interview?" And there was you only got like 2 or 3 people to interview. And I just went, you know, Robert Culp, because I was probably like the biggest name on there. And literally, man, talk about being pushed in a room and pulled out. Okay, here you got, sit down. You know, 10 minutes, go. And
Wow.
it was a good interview
That
for the 10
sucks the
minutes it
atmosphere out, though.
lasted.
It makes it more difficult because you're not as relaxed as you want to be, like with Michelle, you know?
Yeah, true. But I got it, so I just sat there and just calmed down and started going. And he was a great interview for the 10 minutes, but literally once it got to the 10 minutes, I mean, you could see like the vultures just like this. Get out.
They would go in for the kill. You see what happens to all the actors now these days, great. I feel a tiny bit sorry for them. You see someone like, I don't know, The Rock recently for his Black Adam movie, and he's talking to everyone and anyone. It's literally Zoom call after Zoom call, do, all lined up. And I don't blame The Rock. He's trying to be wholesome and chatty and nice because he's a decent human being. But you've got people in the background, you can see them, or you can see the reaction of the interviewer. Like, oh, I've been told to kind of wrap up now. And he's like, it's fine, go on for a couple of minutes, you know. Everyone in the background going, no, it's what you're doing, man. You're screwing my schedule up. So it's difficult. You're trying to ask these questions in such a short space of time. While it can't be organic and natural, I think you've done probably a good job considering what you had to work with, mate. So
even when you see a lot of the talk shows and you see guests come on, some people don't think about it, but they go like, oh, it seems so natural. It's all scripted. Not every word is scripted, but the point is that when a star comes on for his segment, and again, his segment may only be 10 or 15 minutes, it's like, this is your segment. This is the time you're going to be on. These are the questions more or less that we're going to be asking you. And they know exactly what's going down. They come on at that time. They get their 10 or 15 minutes. They relatively know what questions are going to be asked, and that's the end of that. Now, it may come off as being supernatural. Yeah, I mean, not supernatural. That makes sense. Have it come off very, very natural. And yes, they're very calm and natural. But if you think that it's not scripted, it's definitely scripted.
Of course it is. You need some kind of plan when you're going along, don't you? You can diverge a little bit, but you still need main bullet points like we do for our episodes. Apart from this one, we barely get a thing noted down for this one because it's all going from Gray's noggin there, you know.
Memory, yeah.
Is there, Gray, before we wrap up, is there any other little stories along this theme, little funny things that come to mind that you want to mention?
The only thing I kind of want to mention is, even though I never got to interview Shatner, it's interesting because I've been, following him through his career and stuff like that over all the years, and then just thinking about the stories that some of the cast told me a little bit here and there, especially Jimmy. It seemed to me, at least from what I gather, and also you can get it from as a whole from other articles, and in my personal experience, I would say that even though Shatner wasn't the greatest person maybe to them, and he could have been worse, but he was what he was. But it's interesting because now that Shatner, I would say over these last maybe
he's mellowed, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he's mellowed a lot in the last 10 years, and maybe more so in the last 5 or 6. I mean, let's put it this way. No one wants to see anybody pass away, but the dude is like 91, 92, whatever years old.
Yeah.
And I think, when you get to that age,
he's in great health for that age, though, man.
Oh, hell yeah. I hope I'm looking that good when I get that age or whatever. But in any case, I think he's kind of now looking back. And to his credit, especially these last few years, he's been trying to make amends to anything that he may have done that was maybe in the cast size kind of questionable or kind of mean or whatever you want to call it. Not weird stuff, just mean or whatever. And I think he's gotten back to a lot of the cast members, and they've all kind of, when they're alive or not, they all kind of made amends over the last decade.
Is this including Leonard Nimoy? Is this where you're going with this story about how you tried to make amends at the end? Yeah.
Right. There's two things that I think are still happening to this day. Now, Shatner had a falling out with Nimoy, even though they were great friends for many years, and it's been in articles and stuff that he doesn't understand what happened, and he regrets what went down and so forth. But in the long run, though, Nimoy's daughter came out and said, "Look, my dad was getting pretty old. He was having health issues. He wasn't necessarily always in his right mind, etc." And he, meaning Nimoy, was one of those type of people, and there's plenty of people like that. Then when they're like that, the first thing they want is not to see anybody and not to get involved with anybody, even if they're good friends. They just separate. So that sounds. I believe that really did happen. That's totally plausible, and I think, and it was a shame that perhaps Shatner didn't get to see his friend one more time.
Yeah,
But I
sad.
do give him credit that he's
He tried to.
changed his tune over time. He did get back to a lot of the cast members and tried to straighten things out. He flat out made apologies for William Shatner to come out more than once, and flat out apologize to them is pretty big of the man, even though it took maybe a lot of years.
There was a couple of people that especially didn't like him.
Now, there is only one exception to this.
Yeah. Still to this day.
And this is George Takei. So they had whatever falling out, and George Takei is somebody that, and I think this is a shame because I
Oh my.
I talked I talked to George, in the interview and stuff like that. You've seen the interview. I'll probably put that one up eventually or whatever. But anyway, he didn't seem to have those kind or George didn't seem to have those kind of grudges back when I talked to him. Granted, this was 30 plus years ago. I didn't really hear stories like that. I heard little harumps and whatever.
Harump. That's another one.
Harump. He could have treated them a little better, kind of talk. And that was pretty much what was coming out of a lot of the cast and stuff. But it wasn't really anything serious. I don't know the whole story to this. This is only purely my opinion. Okay. But it bothers me a little bit because it seems like George has a real bone to pick with Shatner, and he just will not relent on this. And the bad thing is that it really has lately, especially, has been making George Takei not look so good.
Yeah, because why do you do 6 movies with someone you really, really hate? And don't tell me it's just about prestige and money, because that's just lame. If that's
but not just that, he even in the last so many years, he's always had a dig to throw at Shatner, no matter what. And when Shatner tried to make amends, he totally refused and threw more barbs at him. And when Shatner recently, a year or so ago, went up on the went into space for real, which was kind of cool. Takei came right out and said what did he say? He says he boldly went where everyone's gone before. That was pretty cruel. To say to somebody.
Not that many people have been there. What are you talking about, George? You haven't been there, mate. So
exactly. So that was, to me, that was like the top of the heap, and I'm going like, oh, please, do you really have to say that?
It sounds like a 5-year-old, doesn't it?
Exactly. And just recently, Shatner has come out and kind of had words and said, look, he's had this chip on his shoulder all these years. I'm not going to apologize anymore. It is what it is, and if he wants to act like this, then whatever.
I just hope he keeps his mouth shut the day that Bill passes, and just be respectful. If you don't need to like someone, then he'll be hated. Then he'll be hated in Star Trek lore forever.
I mean, God forbid whichever one goes first. I would hate to see the other, do that. And they should be a bigger man and just kind of like, if you're not going to say it, then just don't say anything.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Even if you don't want to say something good, then fine, just don't say a word. And that's good enough. So we'll see what happens. And hey, look, people are people. When it comes down to it, again, a lot of the people that I've talked to, and I'm not making it sound like I've talked to hundreds of them, but I've talked to a few, stars of this or that. And generally speaking, they all were just people, man.
Yeah.
And you talk to them about football or sports or base, whatever. And or you talk about their favorite movies. They're like just like another person that you would talk to that you got along with, and your favorite movie was this. And you're talking like, yeah, and I like that because and you just get and you start talking about other junk and what you think about the state of this and that and the fun and I mean, it's just is.
Yeah.
And I think that was amazing when I first did this and I first talked to somebody like that. You automatically go like, oh, this is like, ooh, royalty, or something like that.
And then you learn to relax and enjoy it.
Right, exactly. And I never went into a conversation like that. I always tried to be myself, and I have no problem talking, as you can tell. And so we just got into conversations, and they got very comfortable with me, and we just sat there and blabbed about whatever, and stuff. It was almost like, if he lived across the street from me, I'd be going over there going, hey, what's up?
Yeah. Hey, it sounded like you enjoy it. That's the most important thing. And it sounded like Jimmy and Nichelle were two of your kind of more favourite interviews, which is great because they're two of my favourite interviews to listen. When Gray had these interviews, and I don't know if it was your idea, Gray, or mine. I think it was mine. I think I asked you, could we have these interviews and put them on the Trek Way? You're like, yeah, sure. And Gray, to his credit, cleaned them up the best he could. If you don't think they're amazing quality, turn up the volume and just imagine they could have been, they were worse before. So Gray done a good job trying to get some are better than others. But it's just a little insight into what it's like to actually speak to these. And I've met some of them, but not these guys, unfortunately. I wasn't around then. But I met some of the people when I went to, I've been to two Star Trek Voyager conventions because this is my favourite TV show.
Yeah, you're lucky in some respects because my era was TOS and TNG, so I never really got to meet anybody that to speak of from DS9, with the exception of Worf. But Worf originated on TNG.
Yeah.
And even when I interviewed Michelle Forbes at that time, she had just started doing this Ensign Ro character on Next Generation. So when it came to most of Deep Space Nine and definitely Voyager, I met Robert Picardo briefly, but that's about it. I didn't meet any. I didn't meet any of the rest of them.
I was trying to think
to speak of
who I met. So I did meet Kate Mulgrew. I remember her making a promise that she would not leave until she'd signed an autograph for everyone, which was really sweet of her. Jerry Ryan wasn't there, and I'm gutted because I was 18 at the time, 18-year-old lad. Jerry Ryan, Star Trek, catsuit. The rest you can put to your imagination. I was really wanting her to meet her. Kate Mulgrew was lovely. I met. What's her name? It might be Alice Kriege, or it's the other one that played the Borg. It's the one from the movies, basically. Or no, the one from Endgame and Voyager. I met her, and I remember dancing with her for the thing at the end. You actually could dance with some of the stars, and I was dancing with her. Not an outfit and uniform. I never went that far, and no disrespect to people out here who listen and watch this who love dressing up for Star Trek. I can't go that far. I can't. Sorry. Everything else about it, yeah. The actors, the meeting, the dancing, no problem. But the dressing up, no. So I bet a lot of these people had a grand time and then come back with flu. There you are. So I had all these autographs and things as well, and I've lost it. I'm absolutely devastated. So these are great memories. And I'm glad, Gray, that you shared some of them with us because it's just nice to have that insight. But what we'll do, unless you've got anything there you want to add in, Gray, we'll wrap up, mate. We'll do the usual. Yeah, one last
little funny story with Michelle Nichols. When we were done each of the interviews, at that time, since I was doing my radio show, it was called The Art of Entertainment, and they would do a promo. A promo means a promotional commercial for the show. So I would write them something that only would take maybe 10 or 15 seconds. And so they would say something like, "Hi, I'm Nichelle Nichols, you're of Star Trek, and you're listening to The Art of Entertainment," and I'd have the Star Trek music. And I played all those promos, all the Star Trek promos and others on my show all the time during breaks. But anyway, the day that I finished her interview and that I gave her the little thing to say, she was funny, like a true movie star. She's looking at the script and going like, "Okay, I think I'd like to try a couple of different versions," and she's like rewriting it a couple different ways. And I'm like going to myself, like, "You really don't have to." I mean, and they're all bugging me at the back, going like, "You gotta get her out of here. She has to go on stage." I said, "Dude, what do you want me to do?" And so she's going, "Let's do it." And so she writes it like 2 or 3 different ways, and then she delivers the lines on all 2 or 3 for me, and stuff like that. So I was thrilled, but at the same time, the people in the back of me are going like, "Ah."
I wish I heard these, man. I didn't hear this. I heard your the little promo messages, the little commercial advert things at the start, and it sounded like someone was doing the dishes at the same time. One of them that was amusing. But I wish I heard these promos, man.
I do have some of them. The problem is that I have to go back on some of the shows and then run them through, which takes a lot of time.
Does the radio station still exist? Go down there, man.
Yeah, sure. They don't exist. No.
Oh, no.
No, what it was is I had these things because I had to be both. I was hosting a show, and I had to be board engineer at the same time. What do I mean by that? I controlled the microphones for myself, for my co-host, for anybody else that was on a mic. I controlled when the commercials were being played because they're right in front of me on a machine. So I had to sit there and just. So I had my own things on my own little carts, and I used to stick them in, and then I would have to play those. So I don't have those anymore, and even if I did, there is no machinery that plays the suckers anymore. So
Ah.
so virtually, I have to go into these old shows, pass up all the talk, and get to the commercials to find out which ones I play. One day I will do that because I want to lift them,
Yeah.
and when I do, then you'll hear him. I had John Frakes do it. In fact, I had it was funny. I had a sponsor back then. It was called Shorty's Barbecue. Then they had barbecue place, right? And he was a Trek nut and stuff like that. And he was going like, "Oh, could you get him to do like a promo commercial for me?" And and they're paying the station and me for the ad time. And I'm like, and he was a good guy and everything. So I went like, "I'll try." I said, "No promises." So I wrote up a line for Frakes, if I remember how it went. I said, I think the line was he said something along the lines of I like Shorty's Barbecue, and I would take that over Klingon. What was the name of the stuff that they used to eat?
Gak.
Yeah, that's it. I said I would eat that over Klingon Gok any day, and I wrote that whole thing.
You wrote that. He
for
didn't
him.
improvise.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
And he read it word for word. He liked it. He read the thing word for word. And I said, "Really, thank you." I said, "I didn't mean to, push you that. But my friend is going to go completely bonkers over this." And so later, I played it for my friend, and he couldn't believe it. He was going bananas, going like, "Oh my god!" I said, "That is
how
so
do you
good."
even spell Gak, man? Well done. Well done.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably just took it phonetically and tried to make it.
You never Googled
whatever.
it, I'll tell you that much.
Yep. So that was pretty funny that he actually would do it. I expected him not to do it, but he said, "Oh yeah, I'll do it. What the heck?"
What a guy.
Okay.
Top guy. And you mentioned a little point earlier on, Gray, about before the internet and making fun of your age. I remember what it was like before the internet as well, believe it or not. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, people
For a little while.
sometimes they forget that the
First
internet.
10 years,
now,
10, 15 years, yeah. It's not that
well,
old,
I remember
people.
when I was doing my show at the time. I remembered that before the World Wide Web. Now there was an internet, but it was before the World Wide Web, meaning that there was no websites. The entire internet was run by DOS and typing text. That was the
It
internet.
was the US military.
Yeah, well, at first, but then when they turned it over, it became just text driven.
Yep.
So there was just the inkling of what you would call websites just starting, but nothing really, And I always remembered I had a guy who was a fan of the show, and he would feed me stuff that he would get off the text driven internet. And so he started feeding me little pieces of material here and there, and he's the one that found out about Babylon 5 before it ever became real, because this is going back now.
Wow.
What are the year before 1990 or whatever, around the time. And so I'd never heard of this, and he would actually give me. You remember? I don't know if you remember, but you remember the old printers? It used to be the dot matrix printers.
Oh yeah, definitely had that.
Right?
Yeah.
So he would give me pages of stuff that he found and he printed out for me. He says, "Here, look at this," and he would give me other little things and the latest stuff going on in science fiction that he would be able to pull off the internet again. And so I had all these rip and read sheets from a dot matrix printer that I would just kind of go.
That's it.
So I'd go through it and I would just sit there and highlight some of the cooler stuff, and then I would read it out on the show.
So there you go. You've heard it first here, people. Gray did get a little bit of tidbits of the interwebs for his show back in the day. So there you go.
Yeah.
Gray, I do appreciate that, mate. I've said to you before, thanking you for passing those shows on, because what Gray's done is he's turned them into. He's not only cleaned them up, he's actually turned them from an MP3, which was the initial conversion he done, to then an MP4 so that we could put them on the screen with the pictures and stuff you see of the actors. That's great. It's doing that, not me. So cheers, mate. I do appreciate that. But we will wrap up there, because it's a long one there, but we don't mind that. We like chewing the fat. Hopefully you find this form of Star Trek discussion a little bit more interesting and different. No fancy editing, just two Trek nerds just talking about the love of Star Trek. Simple. Nothing else you really need to add to that. So we'll wrap up there. Call to arms. You can find us on the Trekway on Twitter and all good audio podcasting platforms as well. If you don't want to see us, you can hear us on our own. We do specials from time to time, but we do tend to mostly do reviews of Star Trek episodes, and we'll be back Thursday or Friday for the next episode of Star Trek Prodigy. You can catch Gray on his podcast along with myself, Gray's Green Room, on YouTube audio podcast platform and on Twitter at Gray's Green Room. And last but not least, extremepcuk.co.uk is our gaming community that we all originated from, and we do a podcast on it every Thursday as well if you like gaming. So thank you all for tuning in. If you don't mind doing us a little cheeky thumbs up, I'm not even necessarily fussed about the subscription. A thumbs up and a comment below what you'd like to see more of. We'll try our best to do that. But yeah, thank you again, Gray, and thanks for everyone. And until the next time, do your thing, Gray. See you later, guys. Cheers, bye.